Our practice of meditation and development of good qualities is the premise of Buddhism and Enlightenment traditions. That is, we work from the assumption you don't know what full truth or liberation is yet, and simply explaining or hearing about this ultimate liberation is not the thing itself. A bit like falling in love. I've never been in love. Is that sad? It's like falling in love or talking about falling in love or trying to describe something that someone's never experienced. You know those makam tamarind that are green and pink they have in Thailand? I was trying to explain to this guy here what they are. And he's saying, what do they taste like? You're like, they taste of pink, sugary goodness. How do you describe it? Makam, but it's not the brown makam, it's the green and pink ones. I know somebody, one friend of mine, he saw them in the market and assumed that they just weren't ripe. So our premise is enlightenment is like a tamarind, something you've not experienced, and simply describing it or explaining it is not going to create that experience. We have to engage in a practice. This practice is of twofold. One is practicing good qualities. These practices stabilize the character. So we take precepts, we improve our behavior, we practice honesty and sincerity, peacefulness towards all beings. We practice restraint of the speech, restraint sexually, restraint of drugs and alcohol. These are ways that we can improve, but they really just stabilize the character. Further practices we can develop loving kindness, equanimity, sympathetic joy, these kind of qualities, patience, wisdom, effort, truthfulness, the parami. These are all good qualities that we can develop. They help to stabilize the mind. You may notice that when you are engaged in something that's unwholesome, the mind becomes agitated and less easy to settle down or calm down. That's how lie detector tests work. If you're telling a lie, it takes a specific effort and it creates a certain trauma in your galvanic skin response that can be measured by the machine. So we do these good practices in order to stabilize the character, in order to brighten the being that you are. This will enable you more to practice Dharma. We engage in mindfulness practices. These are ways in which we can extract ourselves from the conceptual universe. Indian tradition has this idea of Maya, delusion that we live in all the time. Delusion you can call the conceptual universe. I like to think of it as stories. Our world, our universe is built from stories that we carry around. Other terms, expectations, or a psychological term, constructs. These are all the conceptual universe in which we live and dwell. And if you're not careful, even Buddhism can be another set of constructs, another set of ideas that we say, okay, I like this teaching, I like Siddhartha Gautama, these are the things that he said. You can create a nice constructed Buddhist universe and framework through which you see things. But that would be like being stuck in a prison cell and somebody slipping you the key to the door underneath the door, and then you take the key and hang it on the wall and worship, oh wonderful key, thou art the mechanism for my freedom, thou art liberation, but never actually stepping outside of the cell. So in the same way, Buddhism too is another set of constructs that we can respect, we can worship, maybe, but if we don't put it to use, then we're never going to step outside of the cell. So we need ways to step out of the conceptual universe in which we all live. And this conceptual universe is quite pleasant. It's nice to be in. Have you noticed that when times are good and when you're okay, you can just retreat into this mind-made stuff, into your stories, your imagination, your plans for the future? For me, I like, monks, we always wonder what we would be doing if we weren't monks. We all have these fantasies, usually involving Julia Roberts or somebody earning loads of money, winning the lottery, I don't know. I like to watch Shark Tank. You know that program? Yeah, I love watching Shark Tank, and I watched it yesterday, and my mind goes, oh, this is the business I'd have, and I'd do this product, and I'd sell it here, and I'd make this much money. But I always carry my fantasies through to the end. And okay, so I work hard, and I have this big business, then what? Well, then I have lots of money, well, then what? Then I'll buy myself a piece of land, and then what? I'll grow a lovely garden, and then what? And I'll put a nice little meditation hut, and then what? I'll be able to sit and meditate, which is what I could have been doing for the last hour if I wasn't lost in fantasy. So we need ways to break out of this conceptual universe that we live in, because it's pleasant in there if things are good. You may notice that suffering has a tendency to break you out of that complacency, out of the stories. It has a way of forcing you back into the real world, and we don't like it. So for me, at the moment, my visa last week got rejected. I'm now on a temporary waiver of 21 days, so I have to get a TM30 report done thing, I don't know, in 21 days. This then interrupts my beautiful fantasies, because I only get a few minutes into a fantasy and it's saying, yeah, I got this thing, where will I go? I'm going to fly somewhere, I have to... falling ill will do the same thing. When you fall sick, suddenly it's hard to get lost or caught in fantasies because you have this illness or sickness, or you or somebody in your family. We tend to be brought out of this conceptual universe by suffering. And this is one reason why suffering is a good kind of route into knowing mindfulness. And you may note that at the end of your life, this will happen too. When you know you're about to die, or you have a good chance of being about to die, and I'm not just talking about Bangkok taxis, when you know that, everything will be stripped away. All that you will be left with is this pristine, clear presence, because the mind has nowhere else to turn to. In a large part, our Dharma practice is a way to get ready for that moment when we're going to have to face our end. My good friend Dr. Holly, some of you here will know her. She was 70 years old when she sent me an email. She said, the doctor told me I have cancer and I have 3 weeks left to live. It's kind of tough because she was pretty healthy, or she fairly active. And she died 20 days later. But she was ready. That was the impressive thing, that she said, I'm ready, surprisingly, I'm ready to go. I would like to face my end mindfully, clear in that way. Yeah. It's quite funny because I'm supposed to be the spiritual counselor and I'm like, oh, I don't want you to go. And she says, don't worry, Venerable, all things are impermanent. So break yourself out of the conceptual universe, this framework that we live in. We can practice mindfulness. We trade our thoughts and ideas and snap attention back into direct raw experiencing. What you can see, what you can feel, turning off the thoughts and just coming into this raw presence. At first will be uncomfortable, because the only time you experience this is when you're suffering. But if you practice with it, it becomes very beautiful. And things start to happen if you really just enter into this timeless moment of experiencing one sense, another sense, another sense. I knew one person, and recently I met him, and his conceptual universe would collapse. It's important to note this is the structure of consciousness. It takes effort to keep conjuring up this universe that we live in. Everything in our experience points to the collapse of this Maya, this delusion, and the awakening that comes from it. Anyway, so this would start to happen naturally for him, and he'd start to have some interesting experiences of universal love and oneness and things like that. I'm usually a bit suspicious when people say, like, I see all things are one. Usually they're on mushrooms or something like that. But one of the things he experienced was he could see auras. And I've always been a bit skeptical of auras, mainly because of the kind of people who can see auras. I'm like, I'm a bit skeptical of. But I really like this guy, and he said, no, sometimes like these auras will just snap into being. And I was a bit jealous that he's only 20 years old, and I've been meditating for 30 years. I think I should get some auras. So I looked up on YouTube how to see an aura. You can find anything on YouTube. Anyway, there's a few people explained how to see it, and you do this thing, you have to look it up. You do this thing looking at your hand at arm's length. And so I do this, and then I see this sparkly aura around my hand. I'm like, is that it, or is that just like the eye, the artifact of the eye? Part of it is, if you keep staring at something, you start to see what it is, not what you think it is. It's like if you say a word over and over again, you start to lose the meaning of the word, and you just hear like a weird sound, if you ever have that experience from time to time. So I kept looking at this sparkly thing around my hand. Does anyone here see auras? You're probably not going to say you do, are you? You have done. Do you know when you were young? You're still young. Wow, did you hear that? She said she couldn't remember people's names, but she could remember the colour of their aura. My aura is supposed to be blue. Like the people who see auras, they all say my aura is blue. And that means I'm a person who deeply cares about the welfare of others. So, not true. That's why I don't trust people who see auras. And then I was looking at my hand, and then suddenly snapped in this greenish aura around my hand. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then you try and grab a hold of it, you try and conceptualize it, and it's gone. Anyway, I thought, well, I've seen a green aura. Everyone says my aura is blue. I've done it a couple of times since then, because it takes quite a long time. It's a bit boring, you know, and there's YouTube and things. And then the last time it snapped in, I saw the blue aura around my hand. It was quite cool. So I've seen an aura now. I've tried with other people. Does it work through clothes? It does work through clothes, right? I wasn't sure. So I've tried quite a bit since I haven't got it. But so these kind of things start to occur if you can break out of this conceptual, this thought, this Maya delusion that we are caught in. And mindfulness is a good step into that. Mindfulness, first of all, be present with what you are doing. If you're walking, you walk. If you're eating, you eat. If you are looking at trees, you look at trees. Be careful to do one thing at a time and know what you're doing. Yeah, and that doesn't work if you're watching YouTube. You're watching YouTube. That doesn't work because you're lost in it. However, mindfulness, that's still directed outwards. So proper mindfulness then, you be aware of yourself while you are doing things. Your attention and your interest should be more on yourself than the thing that you are doing. It took me a while to really understand this and have confidence that I know this is right. Because many years ago I did a retreat, first meditation retreat I did. And you go up to report to the teacher, and there was a walking path, or a pathway up a little gully, and you have the interview with the teacher. He'd say to you, on the walk up to come and see me, there was a little Buddha image on the left-hand side. What color was it? And of course, you were just thinking about what you're going to say to this teacher in the interview. You're like, I don't know, you're not being mindful, and you're out. End of interview. Then the next time you come up, you're looking for the Buddha image. Yeah, got it. So you come up and he says, there was a gong on your right-hand side. How big was it? Yeah, oh, come on. No? So mindfulness directed outwards really isn't it. It's one stage of mindfulness. You're leaving the conceptual world and you're starting to come into direct experiencing, but your attention should be on yourself. Your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions. Most specifically, the Buddha emphasized time and time again, be aware of liking and disliking. Your entire world is driven and built from liking and disliking. 99% of your experience is neutral, but 99% of your conceptual world is built around things that you like and you dislike, you want to get or you want to get rid of. This is internal. Be aware. Be aware of your citta, your mind. Is bright or dull? Is happy, is sad, is expanded or contracted? Is in greed, hatred or delusion? It's in metta, loving kindness. Know your own mind and your state of mind. Mindfulness is directed inwards, not outwards. As we are then practicing, you should start to enter into moments where the conceptual universe kind of collapses and you're left in a limbo state, not knowing where to put your attention. One of these things, I was talking with my friend the other day, it's called déjà vu, where you think you've seen things before, but suddenly the world appears in a slightly different way than normal. But I was talking with him, we were talking about jamais vu. Do you know that one? Jamais vu. Being French means never seen it. Déjà, what does déjà mean? Always. Okay. Already. So déjà vu is you have already something new, but you have the feeling you've already seen it. But jamais vu is you've never seen it before. Suddenly the world appears in a way that, like, this is not fitting my construct, my expectations. Some of these experiences will start to arise as you are willing to put down the conceptual universe and enter into direct experiencing. These are the first steps on the path. And this is why religious experiences, including meditation and Buddhism, tend to arise in those moments where the mind stops still. Sometimes walking on a beach, or looking at stars, or entering into a cathedral. A cathedral is designed to give you that awe moment. Stained glass windows and gargoyles and huge walls, and it's supposed to awe your mind into quietness. And it's in quietness that the divine can start to enter and show itself. However, we still have more work to do, so the next task is right concentration. And that means to bring the mind together and to concentrate. Now, a lot of vipassana or meditation circuits these days tend to say you shouldn't practice concentration. I've seen this around in a number of places. There is one line in a text called the Visuddhimagga. It says, if you concentrate the mind, you can get caught in blissful states, and that's a distraction, what's called a corruption of insight. But this appears once in an obscure text. In the original texts that come as close as we can get to the Buddha's original teaching, time after time after time after time, the Buddha says you should practice concentration, meditation, over and over and over again. And this can be proven in the texts. Anybody that wants to question it, the texts are there for anybody to read. You can look for yourself. Over and over again, the Buddha said you should practice concentration, meditation. There are two ways to practice concentration. One is to fix your attention onto a meditation object and hold it there. Not allow it to move. It requires applied and sustained effort. and holding of the attention onto an object. By object, usually we mean the breath, but it can be an object of certain colors, or earth, fire, air, space. Certain colors, yellow, green, blue. Red was not allowed. I don't know what would happen to you if you chose red, but loving kindness, sympathetic joy, compassion, equanimity, these were all things that can be used as objects of concentration. It means you fix your attention onto it and do not let your attention wander anywhere else. The other way to practice concentration meditation is simply to hold the mind in restraint. If you don't allow the attention to go out to anything, the mind will start to naturally gather, accumulate, consolidate, and brighten. As it does so, note that there are certain feelings and experiences and perceptions that will arise that are correct. These are not perceptions of perceiving objects. Let me give you an example. If I sit here and I'm trying to meditate, and after 5 seconds, this damn TM30 visa nonsense comes up into my mind, as it's going to. 5 seconds ago, that thought wasn't there. It's just arisen. Now I react with liking and disliking, with perceiving it, with putting a story around it. If I hold myself in restraint, like, I can feel this topic coming up, I don't allow the mind to get caught. In the exact words of the suttas, it says, one does not pay attention to the signs and features of that object. That's the exact phrase. Okay, it's going to call on me for a while, think about me, and then it's going to start to flutter. It vanishes, but you still know what that thought was. It's an interesting experience. I think this is what Mahayana calls fragrancing. They have this weird word, fragrancing consciousness. It's like a lingering smell of, you know what the idea was, but it's no longer there. And then that disappears, and then your attention goes to the next thing. Some noise outside your room, some feeling in your knee, some thought about who's going to win the election tomorrow. I had to bring it up. Make meditation great again. Yes. This comes up, and then that grabs your attention. Now, if you don't care, it's going to last in your mind for a few seconds, and it's gone. If you do care, it's going to draw your attention in and create a story. I don't care about elections. I think about things like, aeroplanes, or how ducted fans work on a... I've been looking... Visa. Usually engineering things. I think I'm a bit of a wannabe Elon Musk. I dream about things, rockets and aeroplanes and cars, and he's just grabbed my attention. I'm gone. So whatever it is comes in. Depending on your karma, depending on how much you have engaged in that topic before, it's going to attract your attention into it. So you hold attention in abeyance. You don't allow yourself to get caught in the signs and features of anything, one thing after another thing. And what will happen? The mind will start to speed up because you're not attaching to anything. There's no stickiness. So visa comes up, election comes up, and aeroplane wing design comes up. The sound outside my temple comes up. A feeling in my foot comes up. Have I fed the cat comes up. One thing, boom, 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 and it starts to get faster and faster, and you see it because you're not getting caught in anything. At some point, the mind says, bah. This thought processes then appear as unpleasant, as something that afflicts you. It arouses in you the idea, thought and feeling, I want to be free from this. This is called nibbita, or disillusionment, or disenchantment. The light show of consciousness. You become disenchanted with it. Become tired and sick of it. This is the right thing. Some people think, I can't meditate, I hate my mind, it's got all this stuff going on. But that disenchantment is the right way to practice. There was a man in the Buddha's time, Yasa, he had this. He had a troupe of female musicians to entertain him morning, day and night. This is the way the stories are structured, probably because it's easy to paint. And one day he'd fallen asleep, so they all fell asleep. And then he woke up and he saw them lying around, some of them dribbling from their mouths, their clothes disheveled, looking unattractive and not entertaining. And he suddenly thought, life is really distress. Life is distress. And he wandered off, thinking to himself, this life is distress, is distress. And the Buddha, he met with the Buddha. The Buddha said, this life is distress, but this is the entrance to the holy life. So if you experience the mind in this way, you are making good progress. If you hold the mind in abeyance at some point, it suddenly stops. You can enter into, it's called applied and sustained attention, which means it's taking an effort, but not an effort of perceiving something, not an effort of perceiving the breath or lights or colors or meditation objects or mantras. It's an effort just to hold yourself stationary. It feels like suddenly consciousness hits stable ground. There are still thoughts and feelings and things moving by, but they're not going to affect you too much. The analogy is like a river that is frozen over. The water underneath is still flowing, but everything on the surface is stationary. As this happens, there are certain experiences that will arise. One is you will have a body awareness, consciousness. Your eyes will lift up and your attention will come back and will be sunk down in the body. There'll be a feeling of brightening, not lights, because that's just another object of the eye, but a feeling of brightening, seeing with awareness. What else? Sometimes the body will feel rather large. If these things happen, just note that you're experiencing in the right way. These are signposts. You don't have to make them into the meditation object. All you have to do is just keep that steadiness of attention. If you keep going with that, a piti, a rapture, will rises through the body. When we say rapture, it's not a rapture of the mind, like when the English football team beats Germany, or France. We can beat France, that's real rapture. What was it, a few years ago in the World Cup, England got beaten by Croatia, and I was so happy because that was the semi-final. And if England had beaten Croatia, then we'd have to get beaten by France in the final, and that's just unacceptable. I'd rather get beaten by Croatia in the semis. I think France won, didn't they? They did win the World Cup. Yeah, and that's a British game. Anyway, I'm honestly not much into football. I quite like the rugby and the mixed martial arts, but football, yeah, punching people in the face is a lot more Buddhist than kicking a ball around. So there's not rapture as in a euphoria of the mind, but it's a tightening of energy. And you feel right down in the kundalini, in the base, like a movement of the energy through the body. If this happens, you can use that as your guide, as your meditation, as the guide to continuing to consolidate consciousness. There's the feeling of gathering, unifying and centering of consciousness. There's a feeling of brightening. There's another curious feeling that can arise if you're doing this, and that is a feeling of satisfaction. Consciousness by itself, when it's not gone out to anything, is naturally self-content. It's not happy as in winning the pools or euphoria. It's just a sense of completeness. So this also is a guidepost. You can actually drop then your meditation that you're doing and just go to this new experience. So I'm raising these things to point out to you that if you do this kind of concentration, though I say it is withdrawing from all objects, it's withdrawing from perceiving objects of the eye, the mind, the thought, It's not a thought, it's not a mantra, it's not a sight, it's not a sound. But there will be physical feeling of the body, consciousness suffused through the body most particularly. And it's quite pleasant. Unpleasant feelings may still be there in the body, but drop those. Go to that pleasant feeling. It will guide you into the right concentration. So this is right concentration. The Buddha said that from each of these stages of concentration, if you enter into the signless meditation, holding the mind back from all objects, this is a basis for gaining enlightenment. He also said in the Jhana Sutta, from each of these bases of concentration, if you pay attention to the Amata Dhatu, the deathless element, this is a basis for attaining enlightenment. Now, don't ask me what enlightenment is. This is a path, and some days you find it happens quite easily, other days you can't get anywhere, like when, you know what I'm going to say, like when the visa office doesn't give you your visa, because you can't think, you can't let everything go. It crowds into your mind, into your attention. So in those times you're going to have to be mindful of those thoughts and those feelings. Be adaptable in your practice. This is why I really am not a fan of meditation methods, because a teacher comes up and says, right, A, B, C, D, but your mind doesn't always work that way. If you're in anger at somebody, there's no point practicing emptiness of all perception. You need to find a way to disentangle yourself from that anger. If you're caught in desire or greed, you need to find a way to disentangle yourself from those thoughts and feelings. For myself, I always trust the meditator. Usually people kind of know what they're doing, or you will take the teachings that are applicable to you at that particular moment. And that way you're building your own practice, finding your own guide. This is much better than trying to force fit an ABCD meditation method and practice. Everybody who does that, they get stuck on the practice at some point. And the practice itself starts to become a hindrance to their development. I've seen this a number of times. I've sat with meditation teachers. People have come and asked them questions, and I know what they're talking about, and the mind's attaining in the right way. And the teacher has said, reject that, come back, watch the breath, count 1, 2, 3, 4. And they've already gone past it. So be careful with meditation systems. They get over-applied. Trust your instincts.